When I opened my eyes, the crystal chandelier overhead looked exactly as it had before, the same blinding brilliance, the same delicate sparkle dancing over 1,000 expectant faces. But this time, my heart didn't pound with nerves. It thudded with something darker, something cold and resolute. I lay there for a moment on the plush chaise in the dressing room, my hand pressed flat against my silk gown as if to convince myself this was real.
It was.
I was back. Back on the night my life had splintered into humiliation and regret. In my first life, I hadn't suspected a thing. I'd been too busy floating on a cloud of carefully arranged illusions, flowers imported from Italy, a band flown in from Paris, 100 polished guests applauding the perfect couple we pretended to be. Hours later, I'd found Ethan in a dark corridor with my best friend, Sabrina, her lipstick smeared across his mouth. I'd crumpled like paper. The headlines had come within days. He leaves fiancé for her best friend, society darling humiliated. And just like that, my reputation, my pride, everything I'd built had turned to ashes. I'd spent years pretending I was fine, smiling for photographers, while inside, something vital shriveled. But not this time. This time, I would not be blindsided. I sat up slowly, every motion deliberate, like I was learning how to move in this familiar, foreign body. My hands trembled as they reached for my phone on the vanity table. The date glared back at me, confirming what my memory already knew. Tonight was the engagement party. The night I'd believed was the beginning of my forever. I swallowed the knot of old sorrow clawing at my throat.
No.
I refused to feel sorry for myself. I'd been handed a chance to do it differently, to reclaim every shred of dignity they tried to strip away. A soft knock at the door snapped me back to the present. Darling, you all right in there? Ethan's voice was smooth as satin, the same voice that had whispered 100 promises he never meant to keep. I took a breath, smoothed my hair, and forced a smile so convincing it startled even me when I caught my reflection. Just a moment, I called back. My voice sounded calm, unshaken. With a final glance in the mirror, I rose and walked to the door. As it swung open, Ethan stood there, breathtakingly handsome in his midnight tuxedo, his blue eyes bright with feigned concern. I remembered how I'd once melted under that gaze. Now all I saw was a liar. You look incredible, he murmured, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Thank you, I replied softly, stepping past him before he could touch me any more than necessary. My skin crawled at the thought. He didn't notice. He was too busy scanning the room, probably looking for Sabrina. My stomach twisted, but I held my head high. The ballroom beyond the corridor shimmered with golden candlelight and the hum of polite conversation. Our guests, my guests, waited, unaware that before dawn, their carefully curated illusions would shatter. Ethan offered his arm. I took it, not because I wanted to, but because tonight I still had to play the part. I needed them all to believe I was oblivious. I needed them to see the perfect fiancé one last time before I burned everything down. We walked together into the ballroom, and a cheer erupted. Glasses clinked. The band struck up the first strains of a romantic melody. I let Ethan guide me to the dais, our smiles practiced and camera ready. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan began, his voice warm. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate this new chapter in our lives. I watched him speak, my expression serene. Inside, my heart was a nest of vipers. Every lie, every betrayal, was catalogued in perfect detail. My mind replayed the moment I'd stumbled upon them in that hallway. The horror, the pity in Sabrina's eyes when she realized I'd seen everything. But I wouldn't be the one pitying anyone tonight. Tonight, I would be the one with the power. As applause broke out, I scanned the crowd. Sabrina stood near the back, her champagne glass raised, her smile delicate and sweet. Our eyes met, and for the briefest instant, something like uncertainty flickered across her face. I let my lips curve into a secretive smile. Enjoy your toast, Sabrina. It will be the last one you share as my friend. In that moment, the fear that had haunted me in my first life dissolved, replaced by a ferocious clarity. I was no longer the naive woman who'd sobbed herself to sleep while they celebrated their conquest. I was reborn. And before this night was over, I would expose them both to the world. The rest of the evening unfolded like a meticulously choreographed ballet. One I'd already danced to exhaustion in my first life. Except this time, I was no trembling ingenue. I was the woman behind the curtain, watching every step with clinical precision. Ethan worked the room, arms snug around my waist, greeting family friends and shaking hands with business associates he barely respected. I let him pull me along, smiling and nodding like a good little fiancé. The guests complimented my gown, a couture masterpiece in ivory silk and delicate seed pearls. I thanked them graciously, pretending I didn't already know the ending to this performance. Inside, I was tallying their hypocrisy. The society matrons who would clutch their pearls when the scandal broke. The ambitious junior partners who would swarm to Ethan's side, hoping to stay close to the power they thought he wielded. The pitying glances that would come when they realized I'd been the last to know. Only this time I wouldn't be. I sipped my champagne slowly, letting the sweet bubbles coat my tongue as I watched Ethan lean in to whisper something to Sabrina across the room. She laughed, tilting her head just so, a practiced motion designed to look innocent. God, how blind I'd been. A server passed with a tray of canapes. I set my glass down, my heartbeat steady. I'm going to freshen up, I murmured to Ethan. He barely glanced at me. Of course, darling. Don't be long. I wouldn't, but I'd be gone just long enough. I slipped away from the main hall and down the corridor to Ethan's private study. The first time around, I hadn't even known he kept a hidden safe behind the bookshelf. I had known about the separate phone he used to message Sabrina. Now, the knowledge felt like a weapon I'd been gifted by fate itself. The door to the study clicked shut behind me. For a moment, I simply stood there, letting the hush of the dark wood-paneled room settle over my frayed nerves. My palms felt damp, though my expression stayed composed. This was it. My chance to take back control. I crossed to the bookshelf, fingers skimming the spines until I found the one volume I remembered, the leather-bound biography of some 19th-century industrialist Ethan admired. I pulled it forward, and the hidden panel popped open with a quiet snick. Inside, the small safe blinked its digital lock at me. I entered the code from memory, Sabrina's birthday, as pathetic as that was, and exhaled shakily when the mechanism disengaged. Inside sat a slim phone I hadn't known existed until it was too late. My reflection shone in the glossy black screen as I picked it up, the cold metal casing biting into my palm. A single swipe revealed hundreds of messages, flirtation, cruel jokes about me, plans to come clean after the wedding. I scrolled until my stomach threatened to revolt, then forced myself to stop. I didn't need more evidence. I had enough to bury them both. I forwarded everything to my own email, then set the phone gently back in the safe. My hands shook as I closed it, sliding the panel back into place. When I turned, my gaze landed on the sleek security monitor on the desk. Last time, I'd never thought to look. Now I watched the live feed from the hallway outside. Sabrina was standing there, fidgeting with her clutch, her face pale. Perhaps she was wondering why I disappeared. Perhaps she sensed some part of her perfect scheme unraveling. I let my lips curl into a tiny smile. Let her worry. I tucked a small USB drive from my clutch into my palm and slipped it into the port at the base of the monitor. A soft beep confirmed the video was copying. Every stolen kiss in that hallway weeks before, the final proof that Ethan was never mine. When it finished, I pocketed the drive and straightened my gown. My reflection in the study's glass-fronted cabinet met my gaze. Sharp-eyed, composed, a woman transformed by heartbreak and reborn in vengeance. I smoothed my hair, studying my face for any sign of cracks. There were none. Only calm, precise purpose. As I left the study, the hush of the corridor felt different. Charged. Final. I could almost taste the inevitability of what was coming. I slipped back into the ballroom through a side entrance, and not a single person noticed I'd been gone. The music swelled into a romantic waltz. Ethan's best man stood with a microphone, announcing the next toast. I caught Sabrina's eye across the crowd. She flinched. Good. She should. I moved to Ethan's side, sliding my arm around his. He glanced down at me, startled by the sudden warmth in my smile. He had no idea I was already holding the blade poised above his perfect little life. Everything all right? He asked, brow furrowing in that rehearsed way he thought was endearing. Everything's perfect, I said sweetly. Because it was. The only thing left was to decide exactly when I would cut him down. The music faded into polite applause as the toast ended. Ethan raised his glass with a gracious nod, his expression the perfect blend of humility and pride. I could almost admire the performance, almost. But I'd seen behind the curtain now. There was no going back to pretending. I lifted my own glass and let the bubbles fizz against my lips, savoring the last moment of peace before everything turned to wreckage. As the guests began to drift toward the buffet and the dance floor, Ethan leaned in. You look tense, he murmured, brushing my hair back with the same hand that had once tangled in Sabrina's. You're not having second thoughts, are you? I met his gaze evenly, wondering how many other lies he'd spoken with those eyes locked on mine. No, I said softly. Not anymore. If he noticed the faint chill in my tone, he didn't show it. He turned away to greet another colleague, leaving me standing alone near the dais. My stomach twisted, but not with fear. This time, it was anticipation. The feeling of the blade gliding closer to its target. I walked slowly along the edge of the ballroom, studying the crowd as if I were memorizing a scene I'd never get to see again. In a way, I was. By dawn, none of these people would look at me the same. But for once, that thought didn't fill me with dread. It felt like freedom. Near the back, Sabrina was hovering by the dessert table, her smile brittle as she accepted compliments on her dress. When she spotted me approaching, her shoulders tensed ever so slightly. I wondered if some small part of her suspected the truth, that I knew. She recovered quickly, plastering on the sweet expression that had once made me believe she was my sister in all but blood. "There you are," she trilled, reaching for my hand. "I was wondering if you needed help with whatever you were doing." I kept my voice warm, just taking a moment to collect myself. "It's a big night." Her gaze darted over my shoulder, searching for Ethan. "It is," she agreed, too brightly. "He's so happy. You both deserve this." Funny how lies came so easily to her. I wondered if she'd ever spoken a true word to me, or if every confession, every late-night secret, had been a rehearsal for this grand betrayal. "Thank you," I said, "for everything you've done for us." Her smile faltered. Just a flicker. Just enough to confirm what I already knew. She was terrified I might know. Good. I wanted her to squirm. I wanted her to feel every ounce of dread I'd felt when I caught them together. Before she could respond, I turned away, satisfied. The time for pleasantries was almost over. I slipped back to Ethan's side and accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server. My heart was steady now, my hands still. In another life, I'd been undone by this night. In this one, I was the architect of their ruin. "Ready for the speeches?" Ethan asked, brushing his fingers over mine. I nodded serenely. More than ready. The band played a soft interlude, the guests gathering in front of the stage. I saw the event technician take his place near the AV table, exactly as I'd arranged. The USB drive was tucked securely in my clutch, waiting to be handed over. The evidence that would detonate every lie. I thought about the headlines that would come. About the sympathetic phone calls. About the whispered gossip that would follow me for months. But unlike before, I didn't feel humiliation. I felt clarity. I hadn't asked to be reborn, but maybe it was the only gift I'd ever truly needed. The crowd fell silent as Ethan stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. His gaze swept over the audience, lingering on me with a look so tender I might have believed it once. "Everyone," he began, voice smooth as polished glass, "thank you for coming tonight. This is more than a celebration. It's the promise of a future we've dreamed of for so long." The guests sighed and clapped. I stayed silent, my nails digging into my palm. If he noticed my restraint, he didn't let it show. "I've been the luckiest man in the world," Ethan continued, "because I get to marry the most extraordinary woman. She is my partner, my confidant, my—" I looked away, unable to stomach the hypocrisy another second. My gaze found Sabrina, standing at the edge of the crowd, her face pale, her hands clenched around her clutch like she could squeeze the truth back into hiding. "And tonight," Ethan said, "we want to share a little of our story with you." He turned to me expectantly, beckoning me up beside him. The guests applauded again, oblivious to the storm gathering above their heads. I walked to the stage slowly, feeling each step like a heartbeat. At the top, I took the microphone from Ethan, my hands steady. My pulse was calm. I wondered if he could see it, how utterly done I was pretending. I faced the audience and smiled, feeling something in me uncurl, something that had been bound tight since the first time I'd seen him with her. "Thank you for being here," I said, my voice clear. "Tonight is a celebration, but it's also something else." I let the silence stretch, watching them shift uneasily. "It's the truth," I continued softly. "And it's time you all saw it." I glanced at the technician, lifted my chin, and gave the tiniest nod. Let them see. Let them all see. For a split second, the room held its breath. Then the chandeliers dimmed, and the massive projection screen behind me flickered to life. I heard Ethan's puzzled laugh at my side. "What's this?" he whispered, leaning in like he could still pretend intimacy. I didn't answer. I just stepped away from him, putting a clean line of distance between us as the first frame appeared on the screen. A security camera view. A timestamp from 3 weeks ago. A familiar hallway lined with gilded sconces. And in the center, Ethan and Sabrina locked in a hungry, desperate kiss. The hush was instant and absolute, as if the entire ballroom had been plunged underwater. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. Then came the gasp. A single, sharp exhale that cracked the stunned silence. On the screen, Sabrina's face turned toward the camera. Her lips were swollen, her hair mussed from Ethan's hands. She was smiling. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman choked back a horrified sob. I watched Ethan's complexion drain of color until he looked almost translucent. He reached for me, like he thought he could explain it away if only he touched my arm. "Darling." I stepped further back, raising my hand to stop him. My voice came out steady. I'd practiced it in my mind 1,000 times.
No.
Don't. The video rolled on, cycling through text messages that needed no commentary. Sabrina, I hate pretending. She's so clueless. Ethan, just a little longer. After the wedding, we can tell everyone. She'll get over it. Sabrina, promise me you'll end it. I don't want to be the other woman forever. Ethan, I promise. She's nothing compared to you. The words glowed huge and inescapable on the screen. I turned my gaze to Sabrina, whose face had gone gray. Her hands fluttered to her mouth, but she couldn't look away either. For the first time, I let myself savor it. Not just the relief of truth, but the sheer satisfaction of delivering it myself, before they could spin it into a prettier lie. Ethan lunged to grab the microphone from my hand, but I sidestepped him neatly. His voice cracked as he tried to rally the crowd. This is taken out of context. A bitter laugh escaped me, low and unshakable. Really? What context would you like to provide? He froze. For all his bluster, Ethan had never been good at improvising. He'd always relied on the smooth script he'd written for everyone around him. But tonight, there was no script left to follow. I turned to face the guests. Most of them were staring at Ethan with stunned revulsion. Some couldn't even look at him. A few had their phones out, already documenting the scandal they'd be gossiping about before sunrise. I lifted the microphone again, my voice as calm as if I were reciting a recipe. I thought you all deserved to know the truth before you toasted our happiness, I said. Consider this my engagement gift, to myself. A tremor passed through the crowd, like the ballroom itself was exhaling. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, as if on cue, whispers rose like a tide. Did you see that date stamp? She was her best friend. I can't believe he'd do this. I felt Ethan's eyes on me, but I refused to look at him. I'd already wasted too much of my life trying to decode those expressions, trying to figure out how much he loved me, and how much was a lie. I didn't care anymore. Slowly, deliberately, I slipped the engagement ring from my finger. It gleamed under the chandeliers, mocking me with its false promises. I stepped forward and pressed it into Ethan's palm. His fingers closed reflexively around it, like he thought he could hold on to something. I won't need this, I told him quietly. You can give it to whoever you're planning to betray next. He stared at me, speechless. The hush returned, a collective awareness that they were witnessing the precise moment his empire of deception fell apart. I turned away without another word. My gown swept behind me, the train whispering across the marble as I walked down the steps of the stage. No one tried to stop me. No one dared. At the doors, I paused and looked back one last time. Sabrina was crying in earnest now, her mascara streaking in black rivers down her cheeks. Ethan looked cornered, humiliated, small. I'd wondered if I would feel pity when I finally saw them broken. I didn't. I felt free. I inclined my head in a single, regal nod, then pushed the doors open. The night air hit my skin like absolution. The hush behind me burst into chaos. Shouting, accusations, the beginnings of the downfall they'd earned. I didn't look back again. Outside the ballroom, the corridor stretched long and quiet, a hush so complete it felt like a different universe. My heart was still racing, not with panic this time, but with the adrenaline of finally telling the truth out loud. My heels clicked softly on the polished marble as I walked away from the gilded cage I'd once thought was my future. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the cold air bite my cheeks. It grounded me in this new reality, one where I wasn't the woman everyone pitied. I was the woman who chose herself. At the end of the hall, 2 catering staff were loading trays onto a cart, whispering frantically to each other. When they spotted me, they froze. One of them had clearly witnessed the scene inside. Her eyes were wide with a mix of awe and discomfort, like she wasn't sure whether to congratulate me or pity me. I lifted my chin. "Excuse me," I said evenly. "Could you please have the gifts delivered to my car?" She blinked. "Your car mess?" "Yes," I said. "All of them." She hesitated, glancing at her colleague. "Are you sure?" "I think." I let my smile sharpen just enough to make her understand there would be no debate. "They were given to me," I said, my voice still soft but threaded with steel. "I'll make arrangements to have them returned to those who deserve them. But tonight, they come with me." She swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I didn't wait for her to find more objections. I continued down the corridor to the foyer, where the valet stood in uneasy clusters, clearly aware that something explosive had just unfolded inside. My driver caught sight of me and hurried forward, his expression grave. "Miss is everything. Everything is fine," I interrupted, and to my own surprise, it was true. I was fine. Better than fine. "I'll be leaving now." "Of course," he said, bowing his head. "I'll bring the car around." He took my overnight bag from the footman and disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, I stood alone in the grand entry hall, listening to the muted uproar spilling through the closed doors behind me. Someone was shouting, probably Ethan trying to salvage his pride. The thought almost made me smile. A soft click of heels on marble drew my attention. Sabrina burst through the ballroom doors, her mascara-streaked face wild with desperation. When she spotted me, she stumbled forward, her voice cracking. "Wait," she cried. "Please wait. Let me explain." I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. I simply looked at her and waited, as if she were a stranger approaching me on the street. She stopped a few feet away, hugging her bare arms. Her designer gown looked absurd now, a costume she no longer deserved. "Please," she whispered. "You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I tilted my head, studying her. "No," I agreed. "It was supposed to happen after the wedding, wasn't it? After you both made sure I was trapped." She flinched as if I'd struck her. I didn't mean you did," I said softly. "You meant every word. I read the messages." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The defeat in her eyes was almost satisfying. Almost. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper meant for her alone. "I trusted you with everything. My secrets. My family. My heart. And you sold all of it for a man who would have discarded you eventually." She let out a shuddering sob. "I'm sorry. No," I said, and this time, my voice did crack, just a little. "You're sorry you got caught." For a moment, neither of us moved. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing we were sisters in all but blood, all the nights we'd shared plans for the future, all the ways she'd studied my weaknesses and fed them back to Ethan like weapons. I felt no obligation to forgive her. "I hope," I said quietly, "you both get exactly what you deserve." She stared at me, trembling, and for the first time since my return, I felt a true, profound relief. Because now she knew I would never be the naive woman she could lie to again. Without another word, I turned and walked down the steps into the cool night air. The valets were already loading my gifts into the trunk of my car. My driver stood at the rear door, waiting. I let my gaze travel over the opulent facade of the venue one last time. This was supposed to be the night I became someone's wife. Instead, it was the night I chose my own freedom. I didn't regret it. As I slid into the back seat, the first tendrils of dawn were creeping over the horizon. The sky looked clean and new, like the world itself was resetting. And for the first time in too long, I felt clean, too. The car pulled away from the grand entrance, the tires crunching softly over gravel. As the ballroom receded in the rear window, I felt a rush of something bright and electric coursing through my veins. It wasn't relief, though there was plenty of that, or even triumph. It was something pure, a quiet, unwavering certainty that I had saved myself. The driver's voice crackled through the intercom. "Miss, is there somewhere you'd like me to take you?" I hesitated, staring at my reflection in the tinted glass. The woman looking back at me seemed different. She had the same dark eyes, the same delicate features, but she no longer looked like she was waiting for permission to exist. "Take me to the penthouse," I said finally, "and call the storage company. Tell them to expect a delivery." "Yes, miss." I ended the call and exhaled slowly, pressing my fingertips to my temple. My engagement gifts were in the trunk, hundreds of thousands in luxury items, jewelry, and envelopes stuffed with checks meant to celebrate a union that never truly existed. In my old life, I would have returned them all, desperate to prove I was above reproach, that I wasn't petty, that I was gracious in my suffering. I smiled faintly at the memory. Gracious. Not this time. This time, I wasn't going to play the perfect, tragic heroine who gave everything back and vanished with a polite smile. Those gifts were never about love. They were currency, payment for a spectacle. And since I'd been forced to perform, I would keep what was owed. I rested my head against the leather seat and let my thoughts drift. I wondered what was happening back at the ballroom. If Ethan was still trying to spin the story, if Sabrina had locked herself in the restroom to hide her tears. Part of me hoped they'd come after me, if only so I could tell them exactly what I thought. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. They were too busy salvaging whatever scraps of their reputations remained. The car rolled to a stop beneath the private elevator of the penthouse. My driver stepped out to open the door, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss, would you like assistance bringing everything upstairs?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Please have the gifts unloaded in the main foyer." "Of course." I stepped into the elevator, the hush closing around me like a protective shell. As the doors slid shut, I let my shoulders sag, just for a moment. The exhaustion hit me all at once. A bone-deep weariness from carrying too many secrets for too long. But beneath the fatigue, there was something stronger. A foundation I hadn't known I possessed. I was still standing. When the elevator opened into the penthouse, the familiar space felt different. No longer a cage Ethan had paid for with guilt and shiny promises. No longer a monument to all the ways I'd tried to be worthy. Now it was mine. The gifts arrived one by one, carried by uniformed staff who looked everywhere but my face. I directed them to set everything in neat rows by the fireplace. Boxes of baccarat crystal, velvet cases of jewelry, stacks of embossed envelopes. When the last package was placed on the floor, the driver cleared his throat. "Is there anything else you require tonight?" I considered it. "Yes," I said after a moment. "Could you send a courier service in the morning? I'll be making some donations." His brows lifted the slightest degree. "Certainly, miss." "Thank you," I said softly. When the door closed behind him, the silence was complete. I walked to the gifts and sank to the floor, running my fingertips over the satin ribbons. Once, I would have seen these things as symbols of love. Now they felt like evidence, proof that I'd been willing to trade my own worth for approval. No more. Piece by piece, I began sorting the items into piles. One for charity, one for auction, one for repayment to the people whose support had been genuine. I'd keep only what felt untainted, what hadn't been offered to cement a lie. Hours passed, the sky outside shifting from gray to pale blue. The sun rose over the city, gilding the penthouse in light. I felt almost weightless. When the last box was labeled and set aside, I carried my engagement ring to the kitchen. I turned it over in my palm, studying the flawless diamond Ethan had chosen to impress everyone but me. I opened a drawer, found a simple envelope, and slipped the ring inside. No note. No explanation. It didn't deserve any ceremony. I set it on the counter to be sent back to him. One final token returned. Not out of regret. Out of indifference. Because for the first time, I didn't need anything from him. Not love. Not forgiveness. Not even acknowledgement. I had reclaimed every piece of myself he tried to own. And he could never take it back. By late morning, I'd cleared the last remnants of the night before. The gifts were neatly stacked for delivery to the charities I'd chosen. The envelope containing the engagement ring was ready for the courier. I padded barefoot across the penthouse, feeling the soft warmth of the sun streaming in through the tall windows. Without the pressure of expectations or the suffocating need to prove my worth, everything looked sharper, more honest. I brewed a pot of coffee and settled into the armchair by the window. The skyline stretched before me, glass towers glittering against an endless blue. Somewhere out there, Ethan and Sabrina were scrambling to rewrite the narrative, to salvage what they could of their reputations. I let the thought come and go without bitterness. They were no longer my concern. I took a sip of coffee and closed my eyes, breathing in the quiet. For the first time in years, the silence felt like a friend, not an accusation. A soft chime from the front desk console pulled me from my reverie. I frowned, rising to check the screen. Visitor. Adrian Hale. My pulse jumped. I hadn't seen that name in so long that it felt like conjuring a ghost. Adrian had been Ethan's business rival, and the only person who'd ever hinted that he thought I deserved better. The memory returned in a rush. A quiet conversation at a charity gala, his hand steady on my elbow as he'd murmured, "You deserve someone who doesn't mistake you for an accessory." In my old life, I'd been too afraid to believe him. Too afraid to even consider what life beyond Ethan might look like. I hesitated for only a heartbeat before pressing the button to unlock the lift. The elevator hummed softly, then opened with a discreet chime. Adrian stepped out, immaculate as always. Tailored suit, dark hair smoothed back, an expression caught between concern and relief when he saw me standing there. "Hello," he said gently, as if he wasn't sure whether I'd throw him out or burst into tears. "Hello," I echoed, my voice calm. He glanced around the penthouse, his gaze lingering on the labeled stacks of boxes. "I came as soon as I heard." I lifted an eyebrow. "You heard already?" He gave a rueful little shrug. "You know how fast word travels in our circles. By breakfast, half the city knew. The other half will know by lunch." I let out a quiet laugh, surprised by how little the thought bothered me. "Good. Let them." He studied me, his dark eyes searching my face for cracks. "I wasn't sure if you'd want company." "I don't," I said truthfully. "But I don't mind yours." He smiled, something slow and genuine that made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. I gestured to the sitting area, and he followed me, unbuttoning his jacket as he sat. For a moment, we said nothing, the quiet settling between us like a shared secret. "You look," he trailed off, as if afraid to finish the thought. I tilted my head. "Broken." "No," he said firmly, like someone who finally put down something heavy. My throat tightened, but I refused to look away. "That's exactly what it feels like." He nodded, his hands resting loosely on his knees. "I'm sorry you ever had to pick it up in the first place." I swallowed hard. Of all the things I'd expected today, compassion wasn't one of them. least of all from him. Thank you, I said quietly. We fell silent again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like an interlude, like the moment after a storm when the sky is still bruised, but the worst is past. Finally, I drew in a steady breath. I don't know what comes next, I admitted. That's all right, Adrian said. You don't have to. I met his gaze, struck by the simple, steady warmth there. In my first life, I never let myself imagine that someone could see me and not the role I was playing. Now, I didn't have to imagine it. A faint smile curved my lips. I suppose I'll have to figure it out. You will, he said with quiet conviction. And if you'd ever like a little help, someone who doesn't expect anything from you, I'd be honored. I studied him for a long moment. Once, I would have recoiled at the thought of letting someone else in. But this time, I felt no fear. Just the knowledge that whatever came next, it would be on my terms. Maybe I will, I said softly. Adrian inclined his head, his eyes steady on mine. He didn't press for more, didn't try to make promises or declarations. And somehow, that made me trust him more than any vow Ethan had ever whispered. Outside the window, the city moved on. Cars inched along the avenues, people hurried to appointments. The world spun as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything had changed. And for the first time, I was glad. Adrian didn't stay long. He knew better than to overstep. After a brief conversation that felt more like a quiet understanding than anything else, he rose, buttoned his jacket, and offered me a hand. You'll be all right, he said as I walked him to the elevator. I managed a small, genuine smile. I already am. When the door slid shut behind him, the penthouse felt different again. Lighter. Like his presence had chased out the last ghosts still clinging to the corners. I returned to the window and let my eyes wander over the city. It was the same skyline I'd stared at for years, but for the first time, it didn't feel like something I was trapped beneath. It felt like possibility. I knew there would be fallout. The tabloids were probably already drafting headlines. Ethan's family would try to save face, maybe even claim I'd staged everything for attention. Sabrina would scramble to paint herself as the victim. But none of that mattered, because I had told the truth. I had claimed my dignity. I had walked away, without begging for scraps of affection that were never real. And that was more powerful than any revenge I could have imagined. I spent the rest of the morning working methodically. I emailed the charities to arrange pickups. I called the auction house to schedule an appraisal of the gifts I intended to sell. I made notes about the repayment of favors and debts, determined to close every chapter on my own terms. Every small action felt like reclaiming a part of myself. In the afternoon, I stood in the walk-in closet and surveyed the rows of gowns and shoes I'd collected over the years, many of them chosen to please Ethan or to project an image I no longer cared about maintaining. One by one, I began pulling pieces from the racks, sorting them into piles. Keep, donate, discard. It was tedious work, but it felt necessary. Like I was sifting through old skins and shedding everything that no longer fit. When I finished, I showered and dressed simply. Black trousers, a cream blouse, no jewelry except a delicate gold bracelet my grandmother had given me. The woman who'd worn glittering diamonds and designer gowns to hide her fear was gone. I was someone else now. Late in the afternoon, the courier arrived to collect the envelope with the engagement ring. I handed it over without ceremony. The young man glanced inside, eyes widening at the massive diamond before snapping the flap shut. Do you want a receipt? He stammered. I smiled faintly. No. I won't be needing any record of it. When he left, I felt a strange peace settle in my chest. The last tether had been cut. I spent the evening in the penthouse, letting the hours slip by without urgency. I read a novel I'd never had time for. I cooked myself dinner. Something simple and comforting, the kind of meal I'd once been too busy to enjoy. As night fell, I lit a single candle on the coffee table and sat quietly in its glow. My phone buzzed several times, calls from unknown numbers, messages I didn't bother to read. I turned it over and left it face down. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the world's questions. I'd have to decide what came next, whether I would stay in the city or start over somewhere new. Whether I would allow Adrian's steady kindness to become something more. But tonight was mine alone. Tonight, I didn't need to be anything but free. I closed my eyes and let the quiet wash over me. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I could almost see the girl I'd been. Terrified, desperate to be loved, so certain her worth depended on other people's approval. I reached for her, not with pity, but with understanding. She'd done her best with what she knew. But I knew better now. I was reborn. Not just as a woman who had exposed a liar. Not as a tragic figure to be pitied. As someone who finally understood that love without respect was poison. That peace was something you claimed for yourself, not something granted by another person's acceptance. And as dawn began to edge over the city once more, I knew this time, no matter where life led me, I would never surrender that understanding again. I had walked away with my dignity intact. And whatever came next, it would be on my terms.